Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Story 1. My family started breeding dogs when I was a baby. By the time I turned 13, I was already helping educate new puppy owners about proper care. We'd been doing this for over 15 years and we took it seriously. Every dog that came from our home was healthy, well socialized, and placed with families we trusted. We weren't just selling puppies, we were finding homes for living beings we'd raised from birth. This happened when I was in my early teens, so I didn't understand all the details at the time. I just knew something was very wrong. Back then, our breed was still pretty rare, so we had to advertise online to find buyers. Unfortunately, that also meant dealing with some real idiots. A few days after my mom posted our latest litter online, she got a phone call that should have been our first red flag. When my mom answered and introduced herself, the man on the other end didn't even bother with pleasantries. He just bluntly told her that his family had seen our ad and wanted a puppy. My mom went quiet for a moment, caught off guard by his demanding tone. She asked him to tell her about himself and his family. The man gave the bare minimum information, saying he lived with his wife and child in an apartment in the city. When my mom asked about the child's age and whether they'd had pets before, he told her the girl was 6 years old and they'd never owned animals. He brushed off her concerns by saying his daughter really liked animals and they thought getting her a puppy would be great. The conversation continued for a while, but by the end of it, my mom had made up her mind. There was something about his tone and complete ignorance that gave her a bad feeling. She was certain we wouldn't be doing business with them. A couple of days passed, and my mom completely forgot about the interaction. She was firm in her decision not to sell to them. We had some family friends over picking up their new puppy when my mom's phone rang. The same man was calling, telling her they were on their way to look at the puppies and would be there in 10 minutes. My mom was confused and told him they couldn't come now because we had guests. She explained that they hadn't scheduled any meeting. The man insisted they were already driving over and their daughter was excited. Before my mom could protest further, he hung up on her. My mom stared at her phone. They hadn't talked about getting a puppy since that first call a week ago. She'd never agreed to meet with them, let alone set up a time for them to come over. Since he wasn't listening and was apparently already driving here, she quickly explained the situation to our family friends. 10 minutes later, like clockwork, a car pulled into our driveway. The family got out and walked straight into our backyard, heading for our open patio door like they owned the place. My mom didn't want to cause a scene in front of our guests, so she figured she'd let them look quickly and then send them on their way. If she hadn't been sure before that they weren't getting a puppy, she was absolutely certain now. The moment the little girl saw our dog, she made a beeline for one of the puppies. She started petting it, but when the puppy tried to walk away, she grabbed its legs and pulled it back roughly. Both her parents were watching this happen and said absolutely nothing. My mom tried to gently correct the child, telling her she needed to be careful with the puppies because they could get hurt. The kid barely looked at my mom and kept doing what she was doing. Her parents still didn't say a word. After a few minutes, more puppies came over to investigate, along with some of our older dogs. When the older dogs got too close, the girl started pushing them away. My mom tried again to tell her to be gentle. Then one of the puppies she apparently didn't like walked up to her. Without any warning, she shoved it away so hard that the poor little thing slid 2 or 3 meters across the floor. That's when my mom completely lost it. She exploded at them, telling them they absolutely could not push the puppies around like that. She yelled that they had come to her house without invitation when she had guests over, bringing their spoiled child with them. She ordered them to get out immediately and told them they weren't welcome anymore. The father tried to argue, saying they just wanted to look at the puppies since they were planning to buy one. My mom cut him off, telling him they definitely weren't buying a puppy from us or anyone we knew, given how their child treated the dogs. She said the girl would be better off with a stuffed animal and screamed at them to get out of her house. The man tried to say something else, but my mom was beyond reasoning with at that point. She physically escorted them to the door and slammed it shut behind them. I'd rarely seen my mom that angry in my entire life. Everyone in the room just stood there staring in complete shock. We never heard from that family again after they were thrown out, but my mom made sure to warn every breeder in our network about them. Word travels fast in the dog breeding community. I know for a fact that the father contacted other breeders afterward, but when he introduced himself, he was immediately denied. Our network had been warned, and none of us were taking any chances. To this day, I genuinely hope they never got a dog from anyone. That child had no business being around animals, and the fact that her parents did nothing to stop her from potentially hurting our puppies told us everything we needed to know. A puppy isn't a toy you can rough up when you're bored. It's a living creature that deserves respect and proper care. My dad was getting close to retirement, and my parents wanted to downsize to something more manageable. Our house had been their pride and joy for 12 years. When they first bought it, it was pretty basic, just 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. But over the years, they'd poured their hearts and savings into it. They added an extension on the side, turned it into 5 bedrooms with 2 bathrooms. The place was massive by the time they were done with it. Honestly, it was big enough that you could probably split it into 2 separate houses if you wanted to. The thing is, all that work wasn't cheap. My parents had invested a lot of money and sweat equity into making this house something special. It wasn't just about the money for them, it was about all those years of planning, saving, and building their dream home. But with Dad's retirement coming up, they knew they needed something smaller and wanted to free up some cash. When the estate agent came around to value the property, he told them it was worth £525,000. My parents were hoping for a bit more, but the market wasn't great for sellers at the time. Still, they figured they'd give it a shot and see what happened. For months, barely anyone showed interest. We had maybe 2 or 3 viewings, but none of them even made an offer. My parents were starting to get a bit frustrated, but they weren't desperate enough to just give the house away. Then this woman showed up for a viewing. Let me tell you, from the moment she walked through the door, something felt off about her attitude. She had 3 kids and was looking for a bigger place after her divorce. Fair enough, single parents need space too. But here's the thing that really got to me. She came to view our house already knowing she couldn't afford it. The estate agent had apparently told her that because the house had been sitting on the market, my parents might accept a much lower offer. So she came in with this attitude like she was doing us some kind of favor by even looking at the place. After the viewing, she put in an offer for £450,000. That's $75,000 less than the asking price. She claimed that was the absolute maximum she could get a mortgage for. My parents politely declined. I mean, would you take that big of a hit on your biggest investment? That's when things got really weird. The estate agent started calling my parents, trying to pressure them into accepting the low offer. The estate agent kept telling my parents they should really consider the offer seriously because the market wasn't great, and this might be the best they would get. When my dad said they weren't interested in selling for that price, the agent pushed back and said they'd been on the market for months with no other offers. He even tried to guilt trip them by saying the woman really needed the space for her children. Then the woman herself started sending messages through the estate agent. Her arguments were absolutely ridiculous. The messages basically said that my parents were being unreasonable for not accepting her offer. She argued that they didn't even need a 5-bedroom house since they were only using 2 bedrooms themselves. She also played the sympathy card hard, saying it was unfair to deny a struggling single mother and her 3 children a larger home. My parents stood their ground. They'd worked too hard and invested too much to just give their house away because someone felt entitled to it. But this woman wasn't done. She somehow got my parents' phone number and called them directly. This is where it got really entitled. During the phone call, she told my parents flat out that their house wasn't worth what they were asking for it. When my dad disagreed and mentioned they'd had it professionally valued, she got even more aggressive. She explained that she could easily go buy a 2-bedroom house in another part of the city for £350,000 and just add a 3-bedroom extension for way less than what they were asking. My dad told her that sounded like a great plan for her then, but she kept pushing, insisting that my parents should really consider her offer of $450,000 because nobody else was going to bid more than that, and they'd been sitting on the market forever. That's when my dad had enough of her attitude. He told her that if she could get a better deal elsewhere, he suggested she go do exactly that. Then he told her that thanks to this conversation, they were taking their house off the market. She seemed genuinely shocked and asked if they could really just take it off the market like that. My dad said that they could, and they were, then wished her good luck with her house hunting. She seemed genuinely shocked that her bullying tactics hadn't worked. I guess she thought if she was pushy enough and played the single mom card hard enough, my parents would just cave and give her what she wanted. The funny thing is, when she made that comment about buying a cheaper house and adding an extension, it became pretty clear that she actually had a huge deposit from her divorce settlement. So her whole sob story about being a struggling single mother who could barely afford anything was pretty much garbage. She had options, she just wanted our house for way less than it was worth. My parents did exactly what they said they would. They took the house off the market that same week. We're still living here 2 years later, and honestly, I'm glad it worked out this way. My parents love this house, and now they're not in any rush to leave. They're thinking about putting it back on the market soon, now that they've had time to really think about what they want. Hopefully this time they'll deal with people who actually want to make reasonable offers instead of entitled buyers who think emotional manipulation is a negotiating strategy. I work at this small community bank. It's nothing fancy, just a local place where people come to open accounts, close them, handle their banking needs. I help people with their finances, especially the older folks who sometimes need extra patience with all the paperwork. This whole mess started right after we reopened following the pandemic lockdowns. Things were still pretty crazy and everyone was trying to get back to normal. I had just settled into my usual Monday routine when this older gentleman walked through our doors. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well. His clothes were neat but wrinkled, and he kept fidgeting with his wedding ring. When he approached my desk, he asked if he could speak with the banker about some account issues. I told him I was available and invited him into my office. He followed me in and sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. That's when he started explaining his situation. He told me he was going through a divorce and that it had been really difficult. His wife had complete control over all their bank accounts, including the one that only got money from his pension checks. He said he didn't even have a checkbook or debit card for any of them. He kept looking down at his hands while he talked. He explained that he had a legal document that his wife had signed. It said she was only supposed to write checks for necessities until 3 weeks ago. But he was worried she might still be spending money from the account. He asked if I could help him check. Nobody should have to worry about their own money being spent without their knowledge. After checking his identification to make sure everything was legitimate, I pulled up his account on my computer. I told him I could look at his account history and that since she had the checkbook, I could see photocopies of all the checks that had been written and cashed. What I found made my stomach turn. Not only had she continued writing checks well past the date she was supposed to stop, but the checks weren't for necessities at all. There were payments to nail salons, expensive restaurants, clothing stores, and even what looked like spa treatments. I had to tell him that there had been several checks written after that date, and they didn't appear to be for necessities. His face fell, but he didn't look surprised. He said he was afraid of that. When they first started the divorce process, she had taken half the money out of this account without telling him. The court made her put it back, but he'd been worried she'd try something else. I could see those transactions in the account history too. Large withdrawal, then a deposit for the same amount a few days later. He asked what he could do to make sure she couldn't touch his pension money anymore. I explained that since she had the checkbook for this account, just removing her name wouldn't guarantee she couldn't still write checks. The safest option would be to close this account completely and open a new one with only his name on it. That way, she'd have no access at all. He said yes, he wanted to do that right away. We spent the next hour closing his old account and setting up a brand new one. He seemed so relieved when we finished. Before he left, he shook my hand and thanked me for helping him protect his pension money. After he left, I updated my supervisor about the whole situation. It was pretty unusual, and I wanted to make sure I'd handled everything correctly. My boss agreed that I'd done the right thing and followed all our policies properly. A few hours later, I was working on some paperwork when this woman came walking into the bank. She was practically vibrating with anger, her face red and her hands clenched into fists. She walked straight up to the teller counter and demanded to speak with the supervisor right away. My boss came out of her office and invited the woman in. Since my office is right next to my supervisor's office and the walls are paper thin, I could hear every word of their conversation. Karen told my boss that I needed to be fired immediately. She claimed I had been talking badly about her to other customers and staff members. She also said I had no right to close her checking account without calling her first to get her permission. My boss assured her that our staff members never discuss customer information inappropriately. She also explained that our policy clearly said that either party on a joint account can close that account without requiring consent from the other account holder. Karen said that was ridiculous and that I should have called her. She insisted it was her money we were talking about. My boss told her she understood she was upset, but the account was closed following proper procedures by someone who was legally authorized to make that decision. Karen said she didn't care about our procedures and that I had cost her access to her money. She threatened to report our bank to every agency she could think of. My boss said Karen was certainly within her rights to file complaints wherever she felt appropriate. However, she wanted to assure her that everything was handled correctly and professionally. The conversation went on like that for about 10 more minutes, with Karen getting more and more worked up. Finally, I heard her chair scrape back. Karen declared that this wasn't over and that she was going to make sure everyone knew how terribly we had treated her. She walked out of my boss's office, and when she passed by my desk, she gave me the nastiest look I've ever seen. If looks could kill, I would have been a goner right there. She slammed the door so hard on her way out that it rattled the windows. My boss came over to my desk a few minutes later, shaking her head. She told me that Karen had wanted her to fire me for talking badly about her and for closing her account without permission. I said I'd never even seen that woman before in my life and asked how I could talk badly about someone I didn't know. My boss said that was exactly what she had told Karen. Plus, these walls are so thin that she would have heard if I were discussing anything inappropriate. She said that I had handled everything by the book. About an hour after Karen left, I noticed I had a voicemail on my work phone. It was from the gentleman who had been in earlier. He warned me that his wife might be coming to the bank. He said she had just found out about the account being closed and she was very angry. He apologized if she caused any trouble for me and said I was just doing my job. He told me he really appreciated my help. Even in the middle of his own difficult situation, he was thoughtful enough to warn me about what was coming. The next day, my boss pulled me aside to let me know that Karen had indeed filed complaints with several regulatory agencies. However, after reviewing our procedures and the documentation, every single complaint was dismissed. The agency said that we had followed all proper protocols and that either party on a joint account has the legal right to close it. A few weeks later, the gentleman came back to thank me again and let me know that his divorce had been finalized. He looked so much happier and more relaxed than he had during that first visit. He told me that discovering all those unauthorized checks had actually helped his case in court, and that Karen had been ordered to pay him back for the money she'd spent against the court's orders. We never saw Karen again.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.